I'm honored today to be joined with Malcolm Bruce, son of the Hall of Fame musician Jack Bruce. Thank you so much for giving me some time here to talk today.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Elliot. It's good to see you again.
Yes, it's been a little while. So we saw
few years
a
since
few
we
years.
last spoke. Yeah.
So you've gone in and out of these incarnations of the Cream thing, and today you're the Sons of Cream.
Today we are the Sons. Well, we've always been.
You've always been the Sons of Cream.
But yes, the band is called Sons of Cream. We've been working, myself and Kofi and Rob Johnson. We've been working since the beginning of this year. We did 20 shows in the UK and Europe in March, and we've just done 24, and we have one more to go of 25 this summer.
Grueling tour.
Well, not really. I mean, you know, we're blessed and grateful to have the opportunity to do what we're doing. I mean, I could be working. There's nothing wrong with working in Starbucks, but I could be working in Starbucks. You know, that would be much more grueling to me to have to get up at 6 and go and serve people coffee. So there you go.
Okay, so you were doing a project a little while ago, the acoustic versions of some of the Cream stuff, the Heavenly Cream. How did that come about, and how long did that take to actually complete?
Well, the actual recording process wasn't very long, but we spent a lot of time putting it together, getting the guests. So it was really Pete Brown, who passed away last year. He was the Cream lyricist. He was a good friend of mine, sort of my mentor for many years. I grew up with him as my sort of Uncle Pete. And then as I became a professional musician, I started working with him. But anyway, so there's a documentary about his life that is still unreleased, called White Rooms and Imaginary Westerns. And it's an amazing documentary. It's got Martin Scorsese in it.
Oh, wow.
All three members of Cream, so my dad, Jack, Eric Clapton, Ginger Baker, etc. And all these different people throughout Pete's life. Scorsese famously has always used Cream songs in the most gruesome moments of his movie. So anyway, Pete was talking to a label called Quarto Valley Records about releasing the documentary, and or talking to one of the A&R people at that label. It's a small LA-based record label, and they started talking about this idea of doing a Cream tribute record, but an acoustic record. So Cream songs, but done with acoustic instruments. And Pete then came to me. He came to the producer Rob Cass that ended up producing the record, and then Rob was friends with Bernie Marsden, the guitarist, songwriter from Whitesnake, and so it started fanning out from there, because Bernie passed away last year. Very sad. He was a wonderful person, but Bernie had this incredible guitar collection, and he was really good friends with Joe Bonamassa, because Joe Bonamassa has a guitar collection.
Yes.
That's not the only reason they're friends, but they had a good friendship, so it made it a little easier for us to reach out to Joe. Then we got him on board. We got Ginger Baker himself. We started reaching out to people, and we eventually got a really nice roster of artists, I think. Really amazing. You know, Bobby Rush, for instance, incredible person. He came in for one day, and we did a couple of songs with him, which was amazing.
So you recorded at Abbey Road?
Yes.
Now, had you been there before?
Yes.
So what's it like recording in Abbey Road?
Well, it's a recording studio, so anybody that understands.
Wait a minute, it's not just a recording studio, Malcolm.
Well, no, it is the recording studio. I suppose historically but it goes way. Anyone that knows about it will understand that it goes way back before
even
the
before
Beatles.
the Beatles. I understand
that,
right?
It was a classical EMI, and all the old orchestral recordings were done there, I guess, back into the 1920s, 1930s probably. But yes, obviously best known as the Beatles, the studio where the Beatles recorded many of their classic. I mean, yes, it does have an incredible feel to it when you go in there. It's got that sort of museum, an austere, spiritual home of music.
You sit down in the engineering room and sort of...
It's still the same, that particular studio where the Beatles did most of their recording. The control room is up a flight of stairs on the side of the... So you're looking down into this beautiful room, and it's quite big. And there's a corner that they still call Ringo's Corner,
Okay.
which is where he would set up his drums. There's a spring, I think it's a spring reverb or a plate reverb, which is a real one, so it's actually built into the floor. And there are the original pianos there that everyone used. So there's the one that they call Mrs. Mills, in case anybody doesn't know. Mrs. Mills was a famous kind of, what would you call it here, sort of barrel house piano player. It's a particular style of piano playing, singing piano playing that was in the 1950s, early 1960s in the UK. I'm sure that, it's like a kind of out of tune piano sound.
Okay.
And so you can hear that on some of the Beatles, sort of some of their sort of songs that have that kind of feel to them,
What comes to mind is Oobla Dee Obla Da, but I don't know.
Exactly, yeah. And so that Mrs. Mills is still there. So they have the upright piano that they recorded those songs on, and they have two upright pianos called Challen pianos that are not expensive pianos. They're not Steinways or Bosendorfers. They're just these cheap little pianos, but they maintain them. So I believe one of them was used on Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. And so yes, there's all of those things. I've taken meetings there with producers. I've recorded a number of different projects there.
Okay, so
hopefully
you're
one
a
day,
friend of the Abbey Road
hopefully
studios.
one day I'll go back and do my own record there as well, which would be nice.
Last time I didn't get a chance to talk about this, but your dad wrote Theme for Imaginary Western, and it's actually one of my favorite songs growing up. I wondered if you had any stories on how that came about, how that was written.
I don't have any direct stories. I mean, obviously it has the sense of a band being a little bit like, the early settlers in America driving west in their wagons, discovering the new world, and I think most musicians will have had that kind of experience. You're driving across a country, whether it's the US or Europe or wherever, and you're living a nomadic life and you're discovering the world, and especially when you're in your younger years,
Sure.
this is like, wow, we're all gonna drive in one car, and it's tough and there's no money, but we're living our lives and
We're having fun.
so I think from very early on, Pete Brown, who wrote the lyrics and was my dad's chief collaborator, I think always had a really intuitive sense of, he was a poet first. He was a beat poet and had done stuff with Allen Ginsberg and all kinds of things very, very early on. When Alan came over to the UK, they shared the stage and did poetry readings, quite historic ones actually.
Oh.
So he'd had a reputation of that. But why I'm saying that is because he had an insight. He wasn't just writing lyrics, "Baby, I love you" or
Right.
whatever. He came at songwriting from a different perspective. And so he was very intuitive, and I ended up writing about 25 songs with Pete myself.
Oh, wow.
So
That's wonderful.
So I
What a
got
great
the
experience.
yeah. I mean, he had an uncanny ability to get inside an idea. You could give him a title or a chorus and say, "Can you come up with stuff around it?" And,
So here's the question: is the music come first or the words come first for that? Do you know?
well, I think it's different every time.
I
Sometimes
know,
they
but for
can
that
come.
song, I was curious.
Or for that song, I would imagine the way my father worked with Pete, it could happen either way. And also the way I work with Pete, it could happen either way. But it's more likely that for that song, my dad came up with the music and a melody, and then Pete took it away,
For
or
me,
sat with my dad,
Okay.
and my dad played it, and Pete would maybe in shorthand do a kind of syllabic sketch or something, and then start thinking of ideas. But I don't know. I might be able to find out if I ask somebody.
Okay, you got to call.
Okay, did he have a title first, or was that a lyric that Pete had and gave to my dad, and then he set it to music? I mean, this is the thing. It's easier, and in the traditional sense, as I'm sure you know, classical music, you would take a poem, you would take an already existing text, and you would set it to music. Very rarely the other way around.
Right. Do you have any trouble navigating expectations of you being the son of Jack Bruce versus what you've been creating and trying to make a living in the music industry?
Yes, I think that's been a challenge, but I'm hoping the next phase of my life will be, I'll kind of resolve that. You know, it's interesting. Ironically, I think the way to resolve it is to embrace that, you know, and this project with Kofi and Rob is great for that. We're having so much fun with it. People seem to love what we're doing. It's sincere, it's authentic, you know. There are lots of people out there doing tribute bands, and it's all like, hi, you know, it's like, we're going to talk to you with a really affected voice, and these guys are really, you know, and it's like, okay, we're not doing that. We're just doing what the original guys did, which was, without sounding pretentious, they were making music and they were improvising around that music.
And you guys embraced that?
We totally embrace it. We're not playing it the same. Of course, we're playing the songs, but then we go off and reinvent the musical exploration, the journey, the jamming, the improvisation, whatever you want to call it. So I think in some ways me doing this with Kofi gets me out there. People become more aware of the fact that myself and Kofi are not just, we're not a tribute band. We're doing our own thing. We're our own musical personalities, and hopefully off the back of that, people will, you know, the next time I release a record, maybe
now
I
have a
can
bass.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I have so many aspirations, but yes, it's always a thing, right? Oh, you're Jack Bruce's son. Do you play the bass? Well, I'm actually a piano player and a guitar player. But I mean, it doesn't matter. Who cares? You know, it's just a good starting point. I think there's a lot of interest in it, and it's really fun. So yes, it's very difficult to navigate, but maybe if I just don't think about it and I just work, and it just doesn't matter.
Things fall into place.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of examples of people who have, you know, very famous parents or successful parents, and they still find a way forward with their own thing. So,
I can imagine, because every time you and I have a small discussion, there's always something. Oh yeah, and my father did this with this guy. Oh yeah, and my father did this. Like earlier, we were talking about how I saw the Rolling Stones earlier this year, and all of a sudden you popped out. He played with Charlie Watts, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, they were friends since the early 60s. They were in the Alexis Corners Blues Incorporated together. Charlie was the drummer before the Rolling Stones, and my dad was the bass player. Graham Bond was the Hammond player and sax player sometimes. Then and Mick Jagger would turn up at their shows and ask to sit in to sing before the Rolling Stones were formed. There was
Amazing.
A very small scene of British musicians, and from, you know, around 1962 that was all kind of formulating and gestating, as it were, and then 3, 4, 5 years later they were all world famous in all these different,
right.
When the Moody Blues happened, Denny Lane and all those guys were all on that same scene. In fact, the Graham Bond organization, which was, so when Charlie left Alexis Corner's band to join the Rolling Stones, and Kofi gave me the subtleties of this. I always thought when Charlie left to join the Stones, Ginger became the drummer, which is true. But actually what happened was Charlie was at university, I think, and he was like, well, I'm not sure whether I want to do music full time. But Ginger, you join Alexis because it's a much better band than these guys, the Stones, whoever they are. I'll do their thing, but you join Alexis because they're going places, you know.
Oh,
so I think
funny.
it's one of those things where there was an innocence about it. I'm not sure if that's absolutely true,
That's a funny story, though.
But you know, Charlie left it, and they formed the Stones, and Ginger became the drummer in Alexis Corner's band. Then the Graham Bond organization was formed from Alexis's band. So yes, and then in 1965, Chuck Berry did a British tour, which was, so the Graham Bond organization, their manager was Robert Stigwood, before he became Cream's manager, but he promoted a Chuck Berry tour, UK tour, and the Graham Bond organization and the Moody Blues toured with Chuck Berry, and they were his backing band. So I met Denny Lane a few years ago, and we had a nice chat about that, and he was just telling me how he had lots of fond memories about that they kind of were backing up Chuck Berry. So,
that's so great.
And I looked it up, there's lots of posters of them doing it. And
you have some definite, I think, ideas on this AI stuff that's affecting and infiltrating into music.
I'm thinking about these things. I think a lot of us are thinking about these things all the time, especially people that are creative. I think the creative industries there's a problem with it, because the idea was sold that everyone can make art. And so now everyone's making art, but they're not necessarily, everyone's copying each other. There's a format, and that's the expectation. So you go on, drummers of Instagram, and there's 600,000 drummers who all have learnt impeccable technique. They can do anything on the instrument, but they're not saying anything musically because they're just repeating. But that sounds arrogant to say that, but in a way, creativity is not technique. Technique supports creativity, but it can't replace it. And so, can AI be creative? It can replicate. So that's great. Do a song in the style of John Anderson with the lyrics and then it can analyze everything instantaneously and create something. But that's not creative, it's repeating something.
Yeah, I agree.
And so
with you,
I don't know, the next stage is, because you can also argue that a human being, even though it appears as an incredibly complex phenomenon, is also just a series of binary, ones and zeros. And the complexity, if you build all of that up, it seems really complex, like we're all these billions of, unconscious chemical reactions and all kinds of things. But when it comes down to it, you could describe that as a mathematical formula if you were clever enough. So maybe with creativity, you could also kind of describe. Maybe you could sort of infiltrate the creative process and go, yes, we've cracked the code. But I'm not sure you could, because true creativity is very, very rare. Most things that purport to be creative are just repetitious. Something consolidating other things, bringing them together. So,
it's a very provocative way to look at it, Malcolm. Thank you. I appreciate your thoughts on that. Look, I've kept you here long enough. I think this has been tremendous. I can probably continue to talk to you, but you guys got to go on the road eventually. I got to pack up and go home. But I wanted to thank you very much. This was great. Thank you for arranging this and letting me dip into your world for a little bit. It's been
it's been nice. Yeah, no, it's good. No, it's nice to do things properly as well, where you have proper cameras, and I appreciate what you're doing, because you're doing something in a nice professional way. And